Begin today the Gemara on Daf Chav Beis, 8 lines down from the top of the Yamud where it says Hanu Murikoi. So this Gemara brings a story following the point that it spoke about before regarding Amira L'Nochri on Shabbos. You're not allowed to tell a guy to be your shliach to do malacha for you on Shabbos. The Gemara brought this in connection to what it says in the Mishnah that you shouldn't sell a bathhouse to a guy because then he works in it, or even rent it to him rather. You're renting to a guy a bathhouse and then he does work in it and it's your bathhouse and people think that he's working for you. So now the Gemara brings the following story. Hanu Murikoi, there were these people that were Murikoi, which are saffron gardeners. If I got the right translation? Okay, very good. So they were working as gardeners. So now it was a Yid and a guy. They were partners. The Ovid Kechavim Nokit B'Shabbata. So the guy worked on Shabbos, and he took the income from Shabbos. The Yisrael B'Chad B'Shabbata, and the Yid instead worked on Sunday when the guy was off, and that's how they had this. They exchanged between Shabbos and Sunday. So also the Kamei de Rava, they came to ask Rava if this is allowed, and Sharalu Rava says, yeah, this deal between them is allowed. So the Gemara asks that l'chayre, in this case, it's a problem that the guy is working on Shabbos instead of you that should have been working on Shabbos as well. They're partners. If they're partners, they should be working every day. Half a day me, half a day you, or they're working together. And here the guy is working alone on Shabbos instead of the Yid that's working on Sunday for him. So this is a problem. As we'll see here, the Gemara asks from what it says in the Braisa. So Ravina asks Rava, Yisrael v'oivik echavim shekiblu sada b'shutfis. A Yid and a guy they're partners. They're working in a field. They're sharecroppers, and they work together. Lo yoma Yisrael v'oivik echavim. The Yid should not say to the guy, Toil chelkecha b'Shabbos. You take the portion of what you work on Shabbos, v'ani b'chol, and I'll then take from a weekday corresponding to what you're taking on Shabbos. I'll take on another day on a weekday. They're not allowed to set it up this way. However, now what's the problem here? So Rashi explains the problem is because then it comes out that when the guy is working on Shabbos, he's working for the Yid, because the Yid is supposed to work half a day on Shabbos. And instead, the Yid is basically appointing the guy to work full day on Shabbos, and then the Yid will work another day in the week to make up for that. But the guy is working full day on Shabbos. Half of the day is not the time that the guy was supposed to work. He's working for the Yid. So this is Amir L'Nochri. The guy is doing the job in the field half a day for the shlichus of the Yid. So therefore it's not allowed. However, the Braisa goes on to say, but v'im hisnu mitchila, if before they even began the work, before they took this partnership, they made a condition from the beginning that you're going to work on this day of the week and I work on this day of the week. So they're lechatchila not partners where the Yid has the responsibility in the partnership to work part of the day on Shabbos. It was already set up from the beginning before they even started that Shabbos I don't work. So then it's allowed because in this case, the Yid made up lechatchila that Shabbos is b'chalal not my day of work. So the guy is not his shliach. When the guy works on Shabbos the full day, he's not working for the Yid, that's the day of the guy. Now, v'im bo l'cheshbon, if they did not make up anything in advance, that's how Rashi teaches. Bo l'cheshbon, it doesn't go back to this case where they did make that condition in the beginning, but bo l'cheshbon means in a time where they did not make any condition about this, they became partners together without specifying. And then what ends up happening? The Yid does not show up Shabbos, and the guy does. And then on Sunday the guy doesn't show up, and the Yid does. And then when they come to make a calculation how to divide their income, so the Yid says to the guy, look, I worked on Sunday and you worked on Shabbos, so let's divide based on what it is between us that I get for Sunday and you get for Shabbos. So now in Bol Cheshbon, if when they make the calculation how to divide the income between them, and the Yid and the guy, it clearly says that for Shabbos it's for you and instead I get for Sunday, so then Asr. So then it's also Asr, because in the way that they're saying by the Cheshbon, by making this calculation, the Yid is clearly saying that I'm getting for Sunday instead of the fact that you worked for me on Shabbos. So if you specify it, then it comes out that now retroactively we see that the guy did do the work in the place of the Yid on Shabbos. Now, so what's the question here? In this Braisa, you clearly see in the first case that partners, a Yid and a guy that are partners, and the guy is working on Shabbos instead of the Yid, that it's not allowed. And that seems to be the story in the case of Hana Mirukai. These two gardeners here, they came to work together. They didn't make that deal that the Yid said, I don't work Shabbos. No, they were partners, gardeners together. And one was working on Shabbos, the guy was working on Shabbos and the Yid wasn't. And Rava said it's allowed. So how did Rava say in that case that it's allowed if it says here clearly that this is like the guy is working in your shlichus on Shabbos? So when they asked this question to Rava from this brayso, or Ravina asked this question, Ichsif, he became embarrassed. He didn't have what to answer because it turns out that he paskined wrong. Now the saif, but in the end, Igloi Milse, the fact came out, the Hisnu Me'ekarahavu, is that these two gardeners did make a deal that the Yid said that Shabbos is not my day. So when the guy works on Shabbos, he's not working on behalf of the Yid. So his psak was right. Now there's another version here to this story. Rav Gvia mi Beit Kossel. Rav Gvia, he was from the city called Kossel, so he had a different version to the story. So Omar, he said, Hanu Shesili the Arla Havo. These partners, the Yid and the guy, they weren't gardeners, and it wasn't an issue that was connected to working on Shabbos, but they were planting trees, and this is with a connection to Arla. And what's the story over here? What was the deal between the partners, the Yid and the guy? The Arla. So the guy, so he took the fruits from the tree from the year of Arla, the 3 years of Arla. And Yisrael shani that Teda. And the Yid then took, corresponding to that, his share from the years afterwards, from the years after Arla, which is allowed. So now, that was the story that they came to Rava with. So Asala Kamei, the Rava, they came to ask Rava whether this is allowed. And Shadalu, Rava said, yeah, that it's allowed. It's not a problem to make such a deal between them. Now, what's the reason why this is allowed? Because when it comes to Arla, there is no Isser to plant the trees. The work itself that they're doing to plant the tree, and then the work that's being done during the years when it's growing Arla fruits, there's no Isser. The Isser is to not eat the fruits, but as far as the work itself is concerned, there's no Isser at all. So the fact that the guy is doing the work for the 3 years of Arla, and instead the Yid is working afterwards, even if the guy is doing it b'shlichus of the Yid, what's the problem? There's no Issa to work with the Arla tree. And then also, another detail, Rashi says, the fact that the Yid is eating from the fruits of the tree corresponding to the 3 years that the guy ate in the Arla fruits, you may think that there would be a problem here because the fruits of an Arla tree, not only you're not allowed to eat them, you're not allowed to have any hana from it, no benefit at all. So you would think that the Yid is having hana by the fact that he's getting the fruits later based on what the guy got from the Arla fruits before. So Rashi says, no, that's not called that you're having hana at all. Because the first 3 years, those fruits don't belong to the Yid. It belongs to the guy. That was the deal, that the guy gets those fruits of those 3 years, and then the Yid gets the fruits later on, so you're not having any hana. So therefore Rava says, it's not a problem at all. That's the version of the story that Rav Gvia had it.
It's mashma from the Gemara that neither of them owned the field.
Could be, they were sharecroppers,
They were
possibly,
right.
yeah, could
So-
be. But I'm not sure if there's a difference, even if they did own. But for the Gemara before in the story, it seems like they were, sharecroppers. Now the Gemara asks on this version of the story, didn't we see that what happened was after Rava Paskin this way, Ravina asked a question on Rava's Pesaktin from the Braisa regarding a guy and a Yid that are partners regarding Shabbos. So we see that he's asking a question from Shabbos. This is not a story about Arla. So the Gemara answers that according to this version, we have to say that he actually didn't ask him a question. He brought him this Braisa actually as a proof that Rava's Psak is right. Because in this Braisa you see that only regarding Shabbos, where there's the issue of the work itself, and then the guy is doing the work on Shabbos, half of the day he's doing it on behalf of the Yid, then it's a problem. But as long as it's not a situation where the guy is doing the work on behalf of the Yid, then it's not a problem. So since by Arla there's no issue of doing the work with these trees, so then Adarabah, he was saying that there should be no issue. If it's not Shabbos, if it's just Arla, so then it's a raya that Rav's Pesaktin is right. That's what Ravina brought this Braisa for. But the Gemara says that can't be because, as the story goes, Rava got embarrassed when Ravina asked from this Braisa, so it wasn't a proof, it was a question. So the Gemara says, according to the version of Rav Gvia, that detail of the story never happened. Rava never got embarrassed. It's another version of the story that happened. Now, based on this, the Gemara asks the Ibaya, Stome Mai. What's the halacha in a case where the Yid and the guy are partners together, and they don't make up anything clearly, that I'm going to work this day, you're going to work that day. All right, so this is a case that the Braisa didn't address clearly. The Braisa did speak about a case where they didn't make a deal, but then the Braisa says, what happens if then later when they come to the cheshbon, they make a calculation, and then they clearly say that I'm taking for the weekday instead of the work that you did on Shabbos, then it's not allowed. But here the Gemara is asking, what happens if by the time they make the cheshbon, it's also stama? They don't mention anything. The Yid does not say that I'm taking for Sunday instead of Shabbos. It's all stama. There's the Yid, the guy, they're partners, and there's nothing that's specified. It just ends up happening that the Yid works on Sunday and the guy works on Shabbos. So is this allowed? So Tashama, so the Gemara says, what does it say in the Braisa? If they clearly made a deal in the beginning, that the Yid says, Shabbos is, I don't work at all, it's not my day, so then the guy, the whole Shabbos is his day, so then mutter. Then it's allowed, the guy is not working part of the day for the Yid on Shabbos. So from this you could understand, ha, stama, aser. So that proves that if you don't make that clear condition, then it would not be allowed. So that's what you can see from this part of the Braisa. But the Gemara says, but on the other hand, Eim is Seifer, what does it say in the next halacha of the Braisa? That Im bol cheshbon aser. If, when they came to make a calculation how to divide the income, the Yid clearly says that I'm taking for Sunday instead of what you worked on Shabbos, then it's not going to be allowed, because now you see that the guy worked on behalf of the Yid to allow him to take extra for Sunday. So from this you see the hastama. If they don't spell that out clearly when they're making the calculation of the income, mutter, then it is allowed. So from here, it's mashma that it is allowed when it's tam. Therefore the Gemara concludes, Ella meha lekel mishma mino. From this Braisa, you can't prove one way or another, because this is a Braisa where there's a contradiction in the diak from the Reisha to the Seifa. And in such a case, obviously, you have to know how to be medayik the Braisa, but we don't know how to, so therefore we can't prove anything from this Braisa. Okay, so the Rishonim say that what would be the halach in such a case, where the Gemara asks the Siboya, and we don't have a raya, since this is the Niboya regarding a Isser Midrabanan, Amir al-Nachri, so usually the halacha would be L'kula. And some Rishonim say that that's the halacha L'kula, that in such a case it's allowed. Even if it's stam, it's allowed. But the Rambam, the Rif, they paskin the L'chumre in this case, that when it's stam, it's going to be Aser. And the Ran here, the Rishonim discuss from where exactly the Rambam took this from. He says, you see it from the Gemara before, that in a case of stam, it is going to be Aser. Adran Allah lefnei ideyan, shall return to you the first Perek of Masechta Avoda Zara, Perek lefnei ideyan.
Isn't the third the case of Bol Cheshbon the same case
Of stam?
Stam.
But Bol Cheshbon starts off with stam. In the beginning it was stam. But then when they came to make the calculations to share the income, then they specified clearly, I'm taking for Shabbos instead of you taking for Sunday. Stam means that the Gemara is asking is in a case where even when they made the calculation, they said nothing. They just divided the money without specifying. Okay, we begin the second Perek of Masechta Avoda Zara. We had this Mishnah actually quoted before as well. Some of the subject brought up already before. You may not place your animals, if you're traveling on your way and you come to an inn, and it's an inn of Goyim, you may not place your animals inside there. Because the Goyim that are there are suspected on Reviyah, on bestiality. This is, what's the problem? The problem is Lifnei Iver. Rashi here says that even Goyim are also commanded not to have relations with a behemoth. The pasuk says v'davek bishta v'hoyle basar echad, and that says not with a behemoth, not with a chayet, not with a oif, and therefore putting that behemoth there where goyim are is lifnei iver. Now Tosfos over here says, this is again Tosfos, it says this here just like almost all the other gzeiros midrabana that we had in the Masechta until here, that we don't find today, that we're careful about this, not to put behemoths in a place where there are goyim. They're for themselves, that they're chayshish for reviyah by a guy. And Tosfos says the reason is because we see that Papayel by a Goyim today, it's not something to be concerned about. Tosfos actually brings that there's a Gemara later that we'll see on next daf Chav Gimel, that it says that this whole Mishnah is only according to one opinion, but Chachamim disagree with this whole entire Gzeira in the first place. But other Rishonim say, even if there was this Gzeira at a certain time in history, that's when it was something that was common by Goyim. But since today we know that it's not something to be concerned about, so the Gzeira does not apply anymore. Okay. The Mishnah continues, a woman should not be alone with a guy because they are suspected of having then relations with her. Any person should not be alone with a guy because it could be dangerous. They're suspected that they would kill this person. Okay, so the Gemara here brings different. First, the Gemara starts with a stira from another halacha, and the Gemara will show different limitations to this concern that a guy is chashud ala reviyah. That it is not always. Depends when, depends on the situation. So V'ramini, the question was asked from the following brisa. It says that loichen mehen beheme lekarbin. You can buy an animal for a guy, an animal from a guy to be used for a carbon. And ve'en chayshishin, you don't have to be concerned. Loi mishum roiva, not for the fact that the guy was roiva the beheme, he sodomized the beheme. Ve'loi mishum nirva, and not to be chayshid that the beheme sodomized the guy, which both of them are not allowed to be used for a carbon, as Rashi here brings. And it says in the beginning of Chumash Vayikra that you bring the carbon mina behema, that's v'loi kola behema, that excludes, you can't bring a roiva and a nirva. Right? And then the Brisa goes on to say v'loi mishum muktzeh, you don't have to be concerned that the animal you bought from a guy was put aside to be used for Avoda Zara, and v'loi mishum neva. And not, you also don't have to be concerned that the behemoth itself was actually used as an Avoda Zara. And Rashi brings in the pasuk, it says mina bakar and then mina tzayin, that you can't use a Avoda Zara or even an animal that was designated to be used for a sacrifice for Avoda Zara. So you don't have to have any, you don't have to be concerned for any of this. You could buy an animal from a guy. So the question is, reason why when you buy an animal from a guy, there's no concern that this was designated for Avoda Zara or was an actual Avoda Zara. So why is there no concern? Because im isid the aktzei, v'im isid the palche, if it's actually true that the guy set this aside for Avoda Zara or served as Avoda Zara, well, you have a masmalei. So he wouldn't be selling this animal to you. But elo, roiva v'nirva, but the concern that this animal was either roiva or nirva, lachush. You should be concerned for this. As our Mishnah said, you may not put your animal in a place, in an inn with a guy because there's a chshad in the guy that he does this, so then how could you buy the animal from a guy? Omar av tachlife, Omar av shile, bar avine, mishmei derav, that when you're buying from a guy, it doesn't apply, this concern. Because oivid kechavim, chas al behemtoi shaloi ta'oker. A guy, when it comes to an animal that he owns, he doesn't have any relations with this animal because he's afraid that the animal will then become sterile. It won't be able to give birth. That's what happens if he has a relation with this animal. That's a zachar with a nekeva animal. He will cause this nekeva animal to become sterile, and therefore, regarding his own, he won't do it. So you can buy an animal from a guy. The halach of the Mishnah is when a yid places his animal in the inn of a guy, and there the guy doesn't care what happens, so there's a concern that you could cause the guy to do this. Okay, so the Gemara asks on this answer, so hot teinech nekevos. This explains why the animal which is a nekeva, that the guy doesn't want to do this in order for it not to be affected, but zchara ma'yekalameima. How do you explain this regarding male animals where there isn't this concern? So why would would we not be concerned that the guy had a relation with this animal? Reiva, nirva. Rav Kahana says even regarding a male animal, there's also a similar thing. It causes a weakness to the flesh of the animal. And therefore, even by a zachar, if it's the animal that the guy himself owns, he's careful about this. So now, based on this, the Gemara has a shaila from another brisa. So Eloha de Tanya, in a brisa it says that loichim beheme merayin shalahem. You could buy an animal from a goyish shepherd. So obviously, this shepherd is someone that has the rights of selling as well, and you could buy an animal from a shepherd. So the question is, leichish dilma rava law. Why wouldn't you be concerned for the via by the shepherd if it's the owner? So the owner is concerned; it's his animal that he owns. It shouldn't get affected. It shouldn't ruin and the animal, but not by the shepherd. So by the shepherd should still be a concern. So how could you buy from a Gaisha shepherd for a carbon? Answers the Gemara, a shepherd is also afraid. The guy, if he has relations with this animal, and the owner will then notice what he did, so then he's afraid that he won't get paid for his work. In fact, the Gemara, now if that's the case, there's yet another brisa. The brisa says, a yid should not give his animals to a goyish shepherd. And just like the halacha that it said in our Mishnah, you shouldn't place the animals in the inn where goyim are, because then you'll be causing them to do reviyah. The same, you shouldn't give the animals to a goyish shepherd. So leme, why wouldn't we say what we just said here? That that you give it to a goyish shepherd, you don't have to be concerned, because he's afraid that he's going to lose his pay. So he's not going to touch your animal and do this. So the Gemara says, actually, no. If a yid is the one giving the animal to a goyish shepherd, there is a problem. Why? Because the goyim that know very well what one another's behavior is, mirsasi. So the goyish shepherd is afraid to do this to an animal that belongs to his friend a goy, because he knows that his friend a goy is well aware of this kind of behavior that there is between them, and he's going to realize what the shepherd did, that he had a relation with this animal. Or furthermore, this guy that is giving it to the shepherd, Rashi says here, he's going to look out to see that you shouldn't do such a thing. He's looking because he knows that this is the behavior of his friend. He knows that he himself acts this way, so it's behavior amongst them, they know. So therefore over there, the shepherd is afraid, and he's not going to do this. But Anan, the loyadinu buhu loy mirsasi. But the guy, when he gets an animal from a yid, so the guy, shepherd, thinks to himself that the Yiddish owner has no idea about my crazy behavior. By Yidden, such a thing doesn't happen. So the guy says the Yid won't realize if I would have a relation with this animal, and therefore he's not afraid. That's the difference between a Yid that gives it to a guy or a guy that takes from another guy. So Omar Rabbe said, in connection to this answer, that Hainu the Amri Inchi, this is the saying that people say, that Michteve Glala Boza. When you have a stylus, which is this metal tool or utensil that's used to engrave, and it could engrave even in a very, very hard surface, like a marble stone, even Glala Boza, even a marble surface, it could puncture, it could engrave in it. Which means that it's tough enough that it could even get through such a hard place. Ragle bechavre yoda. Similarly, when you have one person that's a hoilich rochel, he's a slanderer, he's afraid of his friend that's a slanderer because he knows his ways. He's himself a hoilich rochel, he's himself a slanderer, so he's afraid of his friend that's a slanderer because he recognizes exactly this kind of behavior. Just like this stylus that it sort of recognizes it's able to deal with such a hard surface, the same thing between Goyim, they know each other's behavior, so they look out one after the other that he shouldn't ruin his animal in this way. But by a Yid, that doesn't apply. Okay, the Gemara continues and asks, so Ihachi, if this is the pshat over here, so Zcharim minekevis loy nizman. So we shouldn't buy for a carbon a zachar animal from a woman from a cave. We should not buy dilme merabale, because maybe over here there is the concern that she had a relation with this animal. So what the Gemara here is going back to the brayso that's speaking about buying animals from a guy for a carbon. So the Gemara before explained that there's no concern to buy this animal from a guy, either because a guy is afraid to do it with the animal because te'aker, it'll make the animal sterile, or because it'll weaken the flesh of the animal. But the Gemara asks though that this doesn't apply in a case where there's animals that are zacharim, and you're buying it from a goyish woman. So in such a case you shouldn't buy from her because in such a case you can't give the answers. Both answers the Gemara said before don't apply. By the zachar there's no issue of te'aker, and also that it weakens the flesh does not apply in this case. But the Gemara answers the chayshinon. We are second. Where am I there? This is part of the question. Yeah, this is the Gemara is explaining the question. The chayshinon, we should be concerned dilma merabale, that maybe she does have a relation with the animal ilava. So the animal has a relation with her, and in such a case, there's no concern that she would not want to do this for the reasons mentioned before. Okay, so the Gemara answers that even here, there's still no suspicion, because kivin the migriba mirsasa. After she had a relation with this animal, what happens is the animal follows her very closely. And because of this, she's afraid of what people are going to say. People are going to see the way this animal is following her, that, she's having a relation with this animal. And therefore she's afraid to do this, so people shouldn't see such a thing. So therefore, even by a nekeva, a woman that owns this zachar, and could have a relation with her? No, we're not concerned that she would allow this to be. So the Gemara asks, if that's the case, Eloha the Tani Rav Yosef. This that Rav Yosef taught, he said that Armalta, an almana, a widow, loi terabi kalba. She should not have a dog as a pet, living alone together with a dog. Why? Seemingly the reason is because there's a concern that then the people will say that she had a relation with this dog. She's living alone with a dog. And also, that's what it says here.
Mama was positive like that on somebody.
Okay.
You get a lot of some.
V'loi tishri bar beirav bo'shpiza. And also, a bar beirav, a young student of the yeshiva, should not live with her, live alone together with her. And this is the issue of yichud b'chlal. But some say that even if it's an oifim where there isn't a concern for yichud, but still a student from the yeshiva should not live by this widow alone. Because again, it's a concern that people will say that he's having relations with her. So the question is, it's understood why this yeshiva student should not live with her, because tzniya, it's something that is very quiet. People would never suspect that this is a yeshiva student, that he's having relations with her, and therefore it's possible for her to get away with this. And if he's living with her together, so that's a very she has no reason to be afraid that people will say anything. So there's a big concern that he should not live with her. But Ella Kalba, when it says there that she should not have a dog as a pet, why not? Even the migraba, we just said before that a woman that has a relation with this animal, what happens is the animal now follows the person in such a way that it draws the attention of people. So mirsasa, she's afraid that people will realize this and she won't do such a thing. So that should be enough of a reason that we shouldn't be concerned. So the Gemara answers, no, with a dog that's a pet is different than other animals. Because by a dog, even the chishadile umtze, when you just throw some meat or a bone to the dog, umasracha basra, that's enough of a reason to get the dog to follow after the person closely. Meima amri inchi. So when people will see the dog following this woman very closely, people will say, "Hide the masracha basra." The fact that the dog is following her, vishomomtze the kamasrich. It's just because of the meat that she feeds her, that she feeds him, not because of any relations between them. So therefore, by a dog, there's still a concern that if she has a dog as a pet, she could have relations with the dog, and she won't be afraid that this would be exposed. And the Gemara goes on to ask regarding the halacha that it said in the Mishnah that you shouldn't have and place your animals in an inn by goyim. So the question is, nekevos, eitzel nekevos, my time aloi. If you have a female animal and you're placing it in an inn where there's only women goyim, why would that not be allowed? And this was actually quoted earlier in the Masechta, that the Isser, that it says in our Mishnah, applies even in this case. Even to place your Nekevis animals by Nekevis, there's no chash for reviyah between them, so why would this not be allowed? My time Elohim Yachdinan. Amamar, so the Gemara, or Amamar Ukva Bar Chome, so Mar Ukva Bar Chome answers, Lifnei Sha'ovde Kichavin, Mitzuyin Eitzel Neshei Chavreyan. Because Goyim, the men, they come to visit the wives of their friends, and upa'amim, and sometimes she'ena moitza, he doesn't find his friend's wife at home, and instead umoitza sabehema, and instead there's an animal that's there with her, and v'roiva, and this guy that comes to visit can have a relation with this animal. So therefore, even to place your nekeva animal by a woman is also not allowed because of the goyim that come to visit there. Or v'iba yisaime, another pshat the Gemara says afilu moitza. Even if the woman is home, nami roiva, this guy will have a relation with the animal, and rather more even than the woman, because the Amamar, the master said, chaviva aleim behenton shel Yisrael yesem min, that it's beloved for them. They would have a relation with a behemoth that belongs to a yid even more than with their wives. There's actually some Mefarshim that say that when it says here behenton shel Yisrael, it doesn't mean dafke behenton shel Yisrael. It means bechlal, a behemoth more even than their wives. And what's the source of this? That there's such a terrible nature that exists by a guy that he wants to have a relation even with an animal. It's not. It shouldn't be the normal nature of a human being. That's not the way a human being was created. So where does this taiva, where does this desire come from? Because the Amar Rabbi Yechanan said that B'shah Shabbat Nachash Chava. It begins from this that happened, that the snake, the Nachash, had a relation with Chava. The Gemara darshans this in the Gemara in Shabbos. It says when it says in the pasuk that Chava said, "Hanochash shishiyani va'oichel," which simply means that she convinced me and I ate from the tree, but the Gemara Dashins, Hishiyani means also Hisiyani, that she had relations with the snake. So then when that happened, Hittel Ba Zuama, the snake put into Chava a Zuama, impurity or a filth that brings this kind of desire by Goyim to want to have a relation even with an animal. Fragt the Gemara, if that's the case, Ihachi Yisrael Nami, this should be by Yidden as well. We also come from Adam and Chava after this story of Chet Tzadas. Some are actually not great as this part in the Gemara, as it brings her on the side, but the Gemara here asks this question. So the Gemara answers, Yisrael she'amdu al Har Sinai, paska zu amasam. When Yidden got the Torah at Har Sinai, that filth that was in Yidden was removed. But Goyim that did not receive the Torah at Har Sinai, loy paska zu amasam. This filth, this impurity was not removed from them. Okay, one more piece here. The Gemara has the Shaila now regarding this Isser of the suspicion we have that a guy has relations with an animal. Hibayalu, the Shaila was asked, Oifis Mai, what's about birds? If you have birds to put in a place of an inn of Goyim, are you allowed to put it there? Is there a concern regarding birds as well? So the Gemara says, Tashama, I'll prove this to you, the Omer of Yudah Mashmul, Mishum Rab Chanina. Ani Ra'isi Oivik Echavim, I saw a guy, Shalokach Avaz Menashok, he bought a goose. Is that the translation of Avis? I believe so. He bought a goose in the marketplace. Rava, he had a relation with it. Chanka, and then killed it. Tzala, roasted it. Va'achla, and ate it. Okay. Va'amir Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Midifti, Rabbi Yirmiyah of Ditpi said, Ani Reisi Arvi Echad, I saw an Arab, Shalakach Yerech Menashok, he bought a thigh of an animal from the marketplace, V'chakak Ba Kedei Reviyah, and he did this also even just with a thigh, Rava, V'tzala, V'achla. And then he roasted and ate it. So there's a concern even regarding oif as well.